The sourcing hero to me is the one who seizes the day and seizes the opportunity.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Sourcing Hero podcast. I'm Catherine, and I'm so excited today. We have one of my favorite people in procurement on the show today. I've got Joanna Martinez. Hey, Joanna, how are you?
Hello, Catherine.
I'm so excited to have you on the show because you bring so much experience to our audience with 30 years in procurement. We have some fun stuff to talk about. And if you don't know Joanna, Joanna is a former CPO, wealth of knowledge across several industries. She's one of the smartest women in procurement that I've met and an incredible speaker. And we are absolutely privileged to have you here today.
Oh, Catherine, thank you so much for that. Makes my day.
You know what? I love speaking to women in procurement. I love women who have strong voices. And that's why I wanted to have you on. And I know that you must have an opinion on the sourcing hero. So tell me, in your opinion and your experience, what does a sourcing hero mean to you?
Well, couple of things. First of all, given that we're recording this in 2020, the obvious sourcing heroes right now are all of the people who dropped everything, dropped their projects, dropped the plans that they had, rolled up their sleeves, and figured out ways to keep their company going, ways to get supplies to the businesses that they were working for in the midst of the COVID pandemic, and kind of that surprise and that tremendous increase in demand and all of the creativity that they had to put in place. So those are the very obvious sourcing heroes that I think I could not do this podcast without mentioning. I think on a day-to-day basis, in a more normal time, the sourcing hero to me is the one who seizes the day and seizes the opportunity. There are so many people. I do a lot of speaking, I do a bunch of consulting, and company after company, people come to me and they're fixated with, oh, how do I calculate savings? And how do I do this? And should this be in the numerator or this be in the denominator? And it's, to me, the heroes are the ones who say, okay, that's nice. Let's just put that aside and get really good stuff done to support the direction that our company is going. I think it's very easy in procurement for people to focus on their own goals and their own objectives, and they don't always take the time to sync them with the business. So the heroes to me are the ones who get to know the people in the business, start to understand the strategy, and then work really hard to make those alignments between all the brain power that's out there in the supplier community and what the company actually needs.
That is a common theme. I've heard several people say that, or at least have that as an answer for what procurement needs to be doing this year going forward, aligning their program with the business, understanding the needs of their stakeholders, and opening up communication. And I think you're absolutely right about that. And I love your first answer about the people that are getting creative and essentially are innovating. They're innovating minute by minute through the pandemic, not really knowing what's in front of them just yet. So tell me, like, what has amazed you in this pandemic with these creative problem solvers in procurement?
Well, sitting on the sidelines, right? And because I wasn't overtly working for a firm and tasked with getting PPE or anything like that, I was biting my nails because I'm going, when are the states going to start to sort of get together and, as a block? When are people going to act like a GPO? And I was very encouraged when I started to see some of the technology providers, some of the organizations, companies starting to come together, or organizations starting to come together in some way, and forgetting about the fact that they are separate entities and maybe servicing very different clients or not typically aligned, but coming together to pool the opportunity to share information, to use technology. I noticed that some of the technology providers offered not just their know-how but their technology as well through the pandemic. So that got me very excited. And I happened to be watching the New York report one day, the daily report on the pandemic, when the governor of New York finally started talking about the fact that New York and Connecticut and Rhode Island and New Jersey and Massachusetts, one other state, I think there were six of them, Pennsylvania, came together and started to look at their strengths and weaknesses and said, okay, you've got these fabric mills, so you figure out a way to make gowns, and you're going to do this and you're going to do that, and we're all going to pool our volume. And I thought that was teamwork and at its best.
Yeah, I remember seeing some of that. It was an incredible pull of teamwork. It's unfortunate that it took a pandemic to do it, but I'm hoping that it has shaped process going forward. So there's that. There's the silver lining, right?
Right. So hopefully the savvy procurement folks who are writing, right now procurement and supply chain is on everyone's lips, right? People are talking about it. It gets verbalized by people who normally would have no idea what the supply chain process was and not think about it at all. So now that there is more focus, it's that seize the day that I was talking about before.
Right.
Carpe the heck out of this diem, right? And go out there and use that increased visibility within your organization to make contacts that you might have hesitated to make before. Get involved in things that maybe there would have been barriers up before. Reminding people about the things that your team might have done to help during the crisis, to then leverage that to which was a very tactical, if you think about it, it was a very
Right.
tactical couple of months, leverage it into how you help more strategically. For me personally, looking back at the time that I worked for companies, the most satisfying procurement achievements were the times that we figured out how to make something, how to manufacture, how to offer something to the customers that the company didn't have before, because procurement figured out a way to leverage that supplier brain power, as I mentioned before, and R&D capabilities, and funds sometimes, to enable the company, my employer, to do something a little bit different.
There's so much there I could follow up on. Specifically, it sounds like that entailed probably a string of seize the day moments for you.
Right.
Can you tell me about one specifically?
Well, I'll tell you about one, and this was in the alcoholic beverage business. So, and it was a vodka product that the company was introducing, a flavored vodka that was a citrus flavor. And they were running an ad that showed a vodka bottle being twisted and lemons and limes popping out of it. And the product, had the word twist in it. So people started calling, asking for the twisted bottle. Well, there was no twisted bottle, right? That idea was a marketing idea in terms of how to show it. But they got so many people. The question was, well, can we make a twisted bottle? And the answer at the time was no. You can't make a twisted bottle at the price point and the durability you would need to run it on a manufacturing line. So that was the answer. And so a group of folks in procurement went out to virtually every glass manufacturer that we could find in the world
Oh my
with the
God.
proposition. And the answer from all but one was no. No, you can't do it. You can't do it. You people want to do it for this amount of money, you can't do it. And one of them said, we'll take this one on. And what they did was they didn't twist the bottle. They just, in the bottle mold, etched it enough so that it looked like the bottle was twisted. It had these markings in it. It made
Oh,
it look like it was twisted. And in fact, it was the product, and the many flavors that followed were a huge success for many, many years.
I'm pretty sure I know which vodka you're talking about.
Well, so it was a win for the supplier. They locked up the business. It was a win for the company because they created this, and they were the ones that actually had, the bottle. Other companies had flavors, but they were the ones that had the bottle that, it kind of jumped out at you. And it was a great win for procurement. That's one of my favorites. But another one was in the services business, where the company I worked for was not number one. It wasn't number two, it was number three globally. And clients would say, well, why should we do business with you? What is different about you that we can't get from number one or number two? Because likely they will have better leverage and better pricing. And the procurement team there, we worked with the supplier community again and the people on the sales side of the business to create a 4-part program of services that actually did leverage suppliers in a different way and did offer some services that number one and number two didn't have. So it's not, and I give you this example because it's not limited to just making something and having a supplier figure out how to make or design something. You can be in a different kind of business and still figure out a way to leverage the supplier community.
So in the first example, it was sheer tenacity of the procurement team, not accepting no for an answer, and then a certain level of diligence. And then in the second example, it was absolutely some diligence and finding the alternative value that maybe they hadn't been offered from the number one and the number two.
Well, I think it was more than that. One of the things that it is very easy to do, when you are a leader in the procurement space, people come to you. Everybody wants to meet you. All the suppliers come in and the salespeople come in, and you can spend all day having your ego fluffed a little bit. The thing that worked in both these cases is that's not what we were doing. Yes, of course, we met with suppliers, but whenever we could, whenever travel permitted, we'd actually meet at their sites and we would pitch our company to the supplier community. And that's what I did in all of the leadership roles I've had. It didn't matter whether I was in a high profile company that everybody wanted to do business with or a company that no one knew. You need to spend some time with the tables reversed. And procurement professionals, all of us, need to spend some time raising the profile of our company and doing what we need to do to be a customer of choice, right? You hear that a lot, but when the flavor company when they're looking at trends and they say, oh, acai berries are going to be a big trend, maybe we want to communicate that to some of our customers that they're going to call you first. With the glass bottle especially, we had already done so much with the glass companies to raise our profile, and we weren't the largest glass purchasers in the world. And so we had already done enough to raise our profile there that the executives knew who we were. We weren't just somebody coming, out of nowhere. In fact, I think that might be a reason that we only got one company willing to work on it. I mean, we couldn't establish big relationships with every glass company in the world. So we were working hard on a handful of them. And I think that there are some that turned us down that if they had known us better would have actually done some work and come back with some creative things as well. So I think that's an important thing for sourcing folks to not forget. It's so easy, right? Procurement people complain a lot about not being invited to the table, not this and not
Mm-hmm.
that. And now suddenly you're in this role and the suppliers are all coming to you and they all want to take you to dinner and they all want to do this and they all want to do that and they want you to buy from them. And I think it's easy to forget to be humble, and it's easy to forget that you need to engage the suppliers and you want their executives to know who your company is and to understand what value you all bring to the party, how you're helping their business.
That sounds like a strategic relationship. We practice the same thing with our suppliers as well. It's so important. The outreach, the relationship, obviously, membership as a GPO is number one, top priority. But we can't deliver value if we don't have the right suppliers in place and if we aren't providing value to them as well. So strategic relationships, it sounded like you just taught a little mini course on that to us just now. Is that the biggest piece of advice you'd give to up and coming procurement, or is there more to it?
Well, a couple of things to up and coming folks. And this is, I started as an engineer in a factory. And, you know, the word disruption gets used a lot. And I can tell you that just by going to class every day, I was being disruptive. I just never really thought about it. Something I did not do early in my career that I wish I had is I wish I had more formally gotten myself into a mentor mentee relationship. So, some people grow up in families where they're exposed to a lot of success. They're exposed to family members who are executives, godparents, who run businesses, and they get a chance to develop relationships with people who and they kind of do it organically over the course of their lives. So they're not intimidated. They're not nervous about speaking to someone who's a vice president because there are six vice presidents sitting around the dining room table, on Thanksgiving. And someone like me, who was one of the poor kids, I didn't come from a wealthy home. I put myself through school. I didn't know anybody who was an executive. I grew up in a very working class town. You don't get exposure to that kind of thing and can be easily intimidated when you're suddenly there and there's a senior level person and you don't even know what to say, you don't even know how to have a conversation. The first company that actually hired me after graduation was the wrong place for me to go. They had no idea what to do with a female in a technical role, and in fact expected me to have lunch with the assistants. Did not expect me to be hanging with the other professionals. And so I quickly understood that there was no one there who was going to be able to help me. Like, they cared more about the numbers on a report than they did about what they were actually going to do if someone who was different walked in the door. So I got myself very quickly into a company that was known for inclusivity. It was known for developing people. And I was lucky enough to soon afterwards get into a relationship with someone who became a really good mentor. And then when she left the firm, there was somebody else who was a good mentor, and they really got me on the right track and would coach me and say, wow, you really did that wrong. Or, no, you're making a big deal out of nothing. Yes, you didn't do such a good job in that presentation, but you know what? It's not the end of the world. That's happened to me a million times. Shake it off and go on. You need things like that. So for the folks who are early in their career and are very confident, have good relationships, that's fine. But if you don't, find someone who's more senior to you, who looks kind, and start with them. I know someone who takes it so far that when she goes to a new company, she looks at the org chart and she targets specifically on the org chart.
Smart.
Yeah, no, that actually is really, really smart.
I love that. And I think that there are plenty of kind leaders in procurement, at least the ones that I've come across. I think that that is a common trait among people in procurement is that kind nature. But I will say that it is not as common for them to be outwardly expressive and as confident in themselves. And so maybe the hurdle of finding a mentor in their minds be too great. So I love the encouragement that you're giving to empower them to, all right, take a little risk, seize the day, ask for some mentorship. And I think asking formally is probably the key there.
Well, for some of us, it's very natural, right? Some people are born extroverts and handle it very easily, would walk into a room, shake someone's hand and say, could I schedule 15 minutes with you to just introduce myself and then, have a conversation then? I know someone who was very, very junior and establish a relationship with someone who eventually became the CEO of the company and would meet a couple times a year for 15 minutes. and get some advice and make a connection. And he would bounce off an idea that he had and get a little bit of encouragement or get some discouragement. It was really great and very positive. But for those people who are not naturally outgoing, people like myself, I tend to be a bit more introverted. It's a little more work. It's a little harder. It's harder to take that step. So I would say look for someone who is kind, obviously you need to find someone who's senior enough, or has enough experience that they're actually going to be able to help you. But I say kind for a reason, someone who isn't full of ego, because in fact, you're going to be asking them, and it's a little hard for some people to kind of make that jump to actually have that conversation. I would also say that although my second mentor was in procurement, my first was not. And that was fine, actually, to have someone in the business giving you some feedback is going to help a lot, because the important thing, you certainly have to get along with your bosses and things, but you also have to get along and be perceived appropriately in the company that you're working. So you need the folks who are your internal stakeholders to be giving you that feedback and taking you on, because there's nothing like being in a situation where your boss is in a meeting and they hear from somebody, hey, I saw that so-and-so did this project and boy, is it really appreciated, or this is going to help us out a lot. I mean, that kind of goes a long way.
Well, you had me fooled. I absolutely pegged you as an extrovert. And I think, honestly, because of the way that we're set up, our conversations have been on Zoom calls. Perhaps this is a good time for the people that are not naturally extroverted. Zoom calls kind of take a little bit of the edge off, I will say.
I think so too. I used to vomit if I had to stand up in front
Oh,
of people.
no.
I would throw up first. Now, thankfully, I never did it on stage, but I used to get physically sick to my stomach. And I've read all of those books. In fact, a friend of mine in Canada had the same problem. And she and I would trade books, and we would trade things back and forth, like feel feel the fabric on your shoulders and do this and do that. And what ultimately worked for me in the end is that I would practice and practice and practice and practice and rehearse so much, be so ready that a lot of the nervousness would dissipate. That, and I would try to queue up somebody to ask me a question early, because I found that once I could engage in a dialogue with somebody, that helped me a lot to calm down. But you're right, there's something about Zoom that is, I don't know, it becomes more of a conversation.
It's a little disarming, you know. I don't know. It's just a screen, right? It kind of takes it down a notch.
Yeah, but we're all learning. We're all learning how to do it differently.
I love what you told me before we started recording, the learning series that you're putting together as a pandemic project. Tell me about that.
Well, I had the biggest January and February that I had ever had in my business, and was looking forward, had just gotten a verbal on a really big piece of work that would have kept me busy through most of 2020. And that went away, obviously, COVID. So rather than sit around and put my feet up and, I don't know, watch Netflix, like how many TV shows can you watch? I said, well, I'm still going to do this. And so I chose 4 aspects of digitization: blockchain, artificial intelligence, robotics process automation, and cloud computing. And then I did a 5th module on here's how you put it all together. If I were sitting saying, how am I going to develop a digital strategy? I have some ideas on how people can actually put it to work for themselves. And what I tried to do in each one was explain what it is in layperson's terms, give some applications, give some ideas of where it's working today, give some ideas of the industries where it might be applicable and might make sense or not. If you are in a small business that's not processing a lot of orders or a lot of invoices, well, robotics process automation is probably not for you yet. But if you have some pain points and some things that aren't working real well in your business, well, there are a lot of very inexpensive artificial intelligence applications that are out there. That might be a better bang for your buck. So I put them together, and I'm in the finishing stages now of getting them all organized. I did get the feedback that my initial set of videos were about as bad as they could be.
Oh, no, I don't
So
believe
I did do them over. I have to say I did do them over, but I'm pretty pleased that now that they're getting to the point, and I've had some experts look at them and say, yep, yep, yeah, you did. This is a pretty complex idea and you did explain it. So I'm putting my efforts right now towards packaging it all and getting it ready and getting it all up on a website. So right now the tentative title is The World of Digital Disruption.
I can't wait to see it. I'm really looking forward to it because those 4 topics, I'm not an expert. And I don't even know that I'm able to carry conversation on any of those. So I can't wait to get in there and take a look and learn a little bit. And as you said before we started this, know enough to not feel stupid in a room of people talking about it.
Right.
That's the goal of this learning
Right.
series.
Well, Catherine, I'll tell you what would happen. So I would give a talk and I would get, after every single one, at least one person would come up to me and say this. They would either say, thanks very much for explaining this because I didn't understand it. And I didn't want to be the only one who raised their hand and said, I don't get what you people are talking about. Or I would hear, thanks a lot. My boss doesn't understand this. Like he or she thinks we can do this and that's not practical. And you've given me some good ideas. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish with it.
So by the time our audience is actually listening to this episode, your learning series will be out. Where can people find you and this resource, The World of Digital Disruption?
So right now, the best thing to do is to connect with me on LinkedIn.
Okay, and I'll be sure to update our audience on exactly where to find your website and the learning series when it's out. And if anybody's wondering if they can hire Joanna Martinez as a speaker, what would you say?
Yes, I still love to speak, whether in person or virtually. It's funny, right? That whole business has been disrupted. And now, events are coming back and people are starting to do things and even hold virtual town halls and virtual team meetings and stuff like that. So yes, I'm happy to do that. I do that and I do some small consulting projects.
I love it. And this conversation has been such a joy. It's been a pleasure to have you on. And I wish you continued success with your new learning series that's coming out. And I hope that we get to have you on again.
Thank you, Catherine. I would love that.
All right. Till next time, Joanna.